Hello and welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig Lyndall, joined as always by Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
It is going great. The Cleveland Browns broke their losing streak. We got a quarterback change, which we're all happy about. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 4-0 to start the season, looking awesome. Got a huge win over the Knicks. Life's going pretty good, with the exception of this whole weather thing. This whole cold one day, warm the next, and I'm going through this thing where my sinuses are all messed up.
You were going to finish it off with the Yankees, man.
Well, last I checked, the game isn't over, so I don't want to jinx anything there. So
fair enough.
We're hoping for a good result for the Dodgers, but we'll see. But yeah, I've got this thing going on where my sinuses get all messed up in the morning, and then it gets better throughout the day, and then at night they start to mess with me. So we're recording this at night, so I can kind of feel them starting to mess with me. But hopefully I'll just power through this podcast.
Yeah, this isn't the subject of this podcast, but we should let people behind the scenes. This is late night for us / for you.
Yeah.
It is 9:51 p.m. on Tuesday night, and normally we love to record this thing right at 5 or 5:30 and be done. But tell everybody why, Andrew.
Why it's past
Why
time?
Do you have such an early bedtime, buddy?
Oh yeah, because I live on psycho hours. I get up at 4 a.m. So for me, I like to be in bed. I don't usually fall asleep right at 9, but I usually like to be in bed watching TV at 9 to kind of wind down and get a decent night's sleep. But yeah, I'm one of those crazy people. I can only work out in the mornings before work. I just cannot do any kind of cardio after work. It doesn't work for me. So I get it done in the morning, and so I get up at 4 and do some brain puzzles and stuff like that to get my day going. Basically, just live like a psycho.
I'm going to be with you someday, but right now I've got a 14 and a 12-year-old, and on weekends they stay up later than I do.
Yeah.
And on weeknights, it's all I can do to stay up late enough to get them to bed before I put myself to bed.
Sure.
But anyway, that's not the topic of the podcast.
Well,
go ahead.
Before we get into the topic, I do have a little bit of I like to have fun little things for the intros of these podcasts, and I don't have any poetry for you, so I apologize for that. But the inventor of the new metal poetry, Dan Ozzi, he put out a new zine, and I purchased it. And the title of this zine is People Standing in Front of Danzig's House, Volume 1. And I'm not going to make this a weekly segment because it's not good for our listening audience. For our YouTube viewers, I can kind of hold this up and you can see the cover here. It's literally a book of people standing in front of Danzig's rundown, decrepit house in Los Angeles. And I mean, it's just full. There's no words. It's just full of pictures of people standing in front of Glenn Danzig's house.
That's awesome.
It's funny because if you've ever, I don't know if you're familiar with the lore behind this or whatever, but basically Danzig lived in this fairly nice neighborhood of Los Angeles, but this house was in complete disrepair. He has not taken care of it forever. There's literally you can see the blinds hanging down in the windows, and he does not live there anymore. I believe I've read that he doesn't live there, but I think he still owns the house. He listed it for $1.25 million a few years back and couldn't get anybody buy it. And there's pictures of the interior, and I mean, it's as run down and it is in complete disrepair. It is not a house you would ever want to live in, but it's exactly what you would expect Glenn Danzig's house to look like, I think. And yeah, so it's just been one of those points of curiosity. And so, people will famously take pictures of themselves in front of Danzig's house and post it on social media. But these, I believe, are all pictures that Dan Ozzi took himself. Some of them are musicians, artists, his friends. There's a variety of different types of people all standing in front of Glenn Danzig's house. So
I don't want to spread any misinformation, but I'm also looking at an article here that says that the house has been
really.
So this might be a very special book because nobody else will ever be able to get their picture taken in front of.
There may not be a volume 2. This was volume 1.
Well, Danzig's got to live somewhere. So
It's true. It is true. So, but it's also just fitting this time of year. We're in the Halloween time, which is always a good time to listen to the Misfits and talk about Glenn Danzig's house.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the latest landscape of music festivals and even a musical cruise. But before we get there, you and I wanted to talk about one of our favorite artists, Alice in Chains singer and guitarist, principal songwriter Jerry Cantrell released a solo record called I Want Blood. You've listened to it a shit ton.
Yes.
I've listened to it probably 4 or 5 times now. And I really, really like it, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. So I'm going to first off put you on the spot. Maybe you're looking at, I don't know if you have this information in front of you but what year do you think Brighton came out, his last solo album?
I'm going to say 2022.
So I was thinking about it for this podcast. I was like, man, I wonder did Brighton come out last year? And I was like, I bet it was 22. So I looked it up. It came out in 2021, which
Oh, wow.
really blew me away that it had been that long since his last solo album. But yeah, so he's got a new solo album, which is obviously exciting for us. We are both enormous Alice in Chains fans. I have, for most of my life, said my musical hero, Mount Rushmore, is Chris Cornell, Stone Gossard, Tim Armstrong, and Jerry Cantrell.
Well, I thought Mark Lanigan would be on there somewhere.
So I really came to Mark Lanigan probably a little too late for him to top those other four guys. But, so it's obviously a big deal when Jerry Cantrell puts out a new album. I was very excited for it. I really love this album. You mentioned I've listened to it a ton. I've really been listening to it almost nonstop, taking a few breaks for keep listening to Foxing and Drug Church, which we talked about. Recently gave Pearl Jam's Dark Matter a listen, which had actually been a little bit of a while since I had listened to that. But for the most part, I've just been binging this album and I really like it. I really love it. But, I told you beforehand, I don't have a lot to say about this album. I don't think necessarily for this podcast. And here's the reason. And I think for some people, this would be a positive thing. And, I'm not saying it's a negative thing for me, but this is the most on brand solo album Jerry Cantrell has ever made. Like this album is essentially feels to me like a late era Alice in Chains album, more so than a Jerry Cantrell solo album. So when we talk about Boggy Depot and Brighton, they both had a lot of different elements and textures to it. There were, Brighton like even has like some songs that I would say even lean a little bit into country, even like a little bit. Boggy Depot had all the like piano parts, these lush arrangements, and Degradation Trip is this like haunting, dark journey, like into like the darkest places of Jerry's mind. To me, that is still the sort of quintessential Jerry Cantrell solo album in terms of like the most personal thing he's ever put out just about himself. But even that had a lot of ballads mixed in, sludgy songs, weird things like Psychotic Break, like this almost like a droning type song. Like there were all these different paces with it. And while I don't want to say every song on I Want Blood sounds the same, they all feel kind of the same to me. They're all serving this same purpose, and it's sort of feels just about as Alice in Chainsy a Jerry Cantrell solo album I think could get. So is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. It's just not what I get excited for from a Jerry Cantrell solo album. Does any of that make sense to you?
It does. And it kind of plays into some of my thoughts about these artists that we love as they get into late stage parts of their career. And we talked about it a lot when Dark Matter came out as well. Like Dark Matter is great, and it meaningfully added to the catalog as far as you and I are concerned. But there are a lot of these bands that are, as they get older and they continue to be pretty prolific, where And I love Jay Mascis. I love Dinosaur Jr. I'm not so sure. Everything that he puts out kind of sounds like Dinosaur Jr., sounds like Jay Mascis, and it's hard sometimes to for any of it to feel vitally important as new material in the larger catalog of music that he and that band have produced. And Jerry Cantrell hasn't been as prolific as Dinosaur Jr., not by a long shot, but because this sounds so much like Alice in Chains and so much like, it's great. I love it. I love the way it sounds, but it just sounds like exactly what I would expect him to do, that it's hard to figure out if any of it is truly vital to the ongoing story of Jerry Cantrell / Alice in Chains.
Yeah, like you wonder, like if Alice in Chains was doing a tour and Jerry said, "Hey, I just want to do a spot in the middle of the set where I break out a couple of my solo songs," and everybody's like, "Yeah, that's cool." I don't know for sure that he would pick any songs off this album to do that. Maybe he would, but I don't. I don't know that any of these feel that essential to Jake. Like, we are doing an exercise in how to be critical about something you actually like. Like,
Yeah.
it's a hard thing because I'm trying to find this balance, because I don't want people to walk away from this saying, well, I don't even need to listen to it. I would absolutely recommend, if you are a fan of Alice in Chains, if you like Jerry Cantrell, you will like this album. There's nothing on this album you will not like. He is doing all of the Jerry Cantrell things. I also want to give a shout out really to all the performers on this album.
So many
The
performers, by the
the
way.
Yeah, Duff McKagan, Bob Trujillo, Mike Borden, like a lot of, I know I'm forgetting a bunch of people who worked on this,
Greg
but
Puciato, Gil
yeah,
Sharon, Vincent Jones. I don't know
yeah,
Lola Colette, but I assume that's the touring keyboard player, female keyboard player who sings a lot of background vocals on tour.
yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so this album sounds great. The playing, the performing of the music is awesome.
And by
Jerry's
the way,
solos
the
are great.
production of it is what really screamed Alice in Chains most of all, where a
Yeah,
lot of his solo stuff, a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, Boggy Depot, it feels like he gets a little more organic, a little more country on that vibe like you were talking about. This one sounds like he used all the same effects pedals and amplifiers from Alice in Chains work.
yeah. No, that's a great point. And so like, I think the Jay Mascis comparison really was really spot on. I little jealous I didn't think of that comparison. But yeah, so like, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from listening to this. It's just one of those things that, do I think I'll be listening to this album 5 years from now? I don't know. Like, I just have a feeling when I'm like in the mood for listening to a Jerry Cantrell solo album, I'm probably going to go for one of the other three before I would go to this one, because again, like, this one sort of makes me just want to listen to Alice in Chains, if that makes sense. Like, it really
Yeah,
makes me
well,
like, yeah, go ahead.
and on top of it, like when I think of Jerry Cantrell solo, I listen to those records, but then if one of those records drives me to go straight to Alice in Chains, it's usually the Tripod record, which I think is most reminiscent of his solo material. The what self-titled? I always call it
Yeah, I
Tripod,
always
the
call it, I
three-legged
call it
dog.
tripod. It's
Yeah.
tripod.
But yeah, no, I'm proud of us because we're over the moon for him. We're over the moon for this record, and we had a critical conversation about it. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is like I'm looking at the stats don't lie. I'm looking at the Spotify stats, and
Yeah.
everybody listens to the first four tracks, and then half the people just fall off.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I really do.
And the
Like Jerry
first four tracks
Cantrell,
are phenomenal.
yeah, they're so good. Like, this really album starts out strong, and it's not even that it fades in the back end as much as like you just kind of get the idea by then. Jerry Cantrell is beyond one of my favorite musicians, one of my just favorite people. I love interviews with him. He's got a really great new interview with Rick Beato on one of Rick Beato's YouTube channels. Go check it out. You just search for it, you'll find it. It was really good, and like, he talks about some of his approach to how he thinks about solo albums, and it's all worthwhile. Like, this is still an artistic endeavor for Jerry. He did not mail this in. I'm trying to avoid giving that impression as well. Like, again, these are well-written songs, well-performed songs. The guitar solos are awesome on this album. Like, I love the way Jerry approaches guitar solos. And he nails every single one of them on this. Like, it's a really great album, and I've been listening to it nonstop. But what it ultimately really makes me eager is for a new Alice in Chains album. Like, I'm really itching for, like, I really liked Rainier Fog, but I don't even remember, like, Rainier Fog was probably like 2020, 2019. Was that even before COVID? Like, that was a long time ago when Rainier
Oh
Fog came
yeah,
out.
2018.
It was 18. Yeah. So we are very much due for a new Alice in Chains album. And so, I'm being as critical as I can be about something that I love and a person that I really admire and has long been a hero of mine. But
All right, last thing, and this has been one of my, especially after seeing Jerry live earlier this year, one of my observations about the Jerry material, especially when he plays solo alongside some of the greatest hits from Alice in Chains, is that when Jerry writes solo, it seems like he always goes to the chorus one extra time. Maybe his editing isn't quite as tight as it is when he's in the band. And so I wonder if some of that co-writing with the original members of Alice in Chains causes him to tighten up some of the things, and maybe because these songs are sprawling. There's not a
yeah,
song under 4 minutes. Some are 5.5, 6 minutes long. And I'm again not complaining, but when you would normally expect an Alice in Chains song to stop, that's when a Jerry song goes after that chorus one more time.
right. Which makes sense, because when Jerry writes for Alice in Chains, he's writing for another singer. He's not writing for himself. And so I think that probably just impacts that whole conversation on the structure of the songs. And yes, I mean, this is not just true of this album. It's true of a lot of Jerry's solo albums. He tends to have a lot more 5 minute long songs than probably Alice in Chains do. I will also, if I'm going to criticize one other thing, this is something that our loyal longtime listeners have heard me complain about a lot. The price of his vinyl was just insane. I think it was $45 for the vinyl, and I actually opted not to pre-order it just because of that. But when you throw shipping on top of that, it's too much. Now I hope to at some point pick this up at a record store, but it's these prices on vinyl. I mean, that's another topic perhaps for another day, but it is getting wild out there, as they say. So, but I'm happy to have this album. I'm enjoying my time with it this year. It's not going to finish in my top 10 or anything like that. I don't have the enthusiasm for this that I had when we talked about Drug Church or Foxing, those albums, or even Dark Matter for that matter. But, I'm happy to have it. I've enjoyed my time with it. And if nothing else, like, I gave it its due attention.
Yeah. So the next topic that we wanted to talk about is not a very specific one, but it's one that you and I have touched on from time to time. And there are a lot of new announcements for festivals. And I'm actually going to start with the Innings Festival, because this was probably the music festival that kicked off all things festival for me. I started going before the pandemic. There was a break. It was actually one of the last musical things I saw before the pandemic. It was when Death Cab came out and they had to drop out after, I don't know, like 4 or 5 songs. And pretty sure that Ben Gibbard had COVID and couldn't sing.
Mm,
And so this was probably 2 weeks before the world shut down, 3 weeks before the world shut down. I
that's
was out in
crazy to think
Tempe,
about.
Arizona. I know. And so we actually skipped last year too when the Chili Peppers headlined, but it's a wonderful festival. Tempe in February is a really nice place to be, and they usually have some pretty interesting lineups. And nowadays we've seen so many festivals and so many bands that my friends and I, we're always looking to see if if there's a band or two that we can cross off our list that we've never seen before. And this year, Friday night doesn't really do much for us. I'm excited to see some of the bands if I go. It's Fall Out Boy, Incubus, who we've seen at festivals probably 4 or 5 times now. They're just like the quintessential festival band at this moment in time.
I've never seen Incubus. I wouldn't mind seeing them at some
Oh,
point.
they're great. They're
Yeah.
great. I've never seen the Black Keys, a boy from Northeast Ohio, and I've never seen the Black Keys. Interesting that they're the third name on the poster for Friday night after going through all the things that they went through, canceling tours and whatnot this year. And then Saturday night, the reason, if we go, the reason that we're going is because we've always wanted to see the Killers. It's the Killers, Beck, Gary Clark Jr., Boys to Men, and Jack's Mannequin. Throwing Boys to Men in there. I saw Boys to Men this summer. They were awesome. So I'll check them out again.
Yeah. So
you would never go to that festival, right? You would never travel that far.
Not for that lineup. There's been some lineups that in previous years that you've gone to that have been interesting enough that like I'd possibly consider it. But I was going to ask you, like, is there a direct tie into baseball with this being called Innings Fest, or is it just like because it's in a spot where there's minor league baseball?
Yeah,
or not
both.
minor league, spring training.
Spring training. So yeah, there is, and then they have a special stage area and meet and greet with players. I got to meet Kenny Lofton there once.
Nice.
A couple years ago, which was really cool. And then it's always hosted by Ryan Dempster, he does the interviews.
Yeah. Okay.
But this year they've got Jessica Mendoza, Vince Coleman, Evan Longoria, Jim Abbott, Jake Peavy, old-time Cleveland Indians player Brett Butler. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Brett Butler, the second baseman. Yep. Chili Davis and Junior Spivey. So,
man,
that's not the main attraction, but if you can, walk around back and get your picture taken with Brett Butler and say a few words to him, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So you said that like Innings Fest is kind of what started the festival thing for you. I'm curious, like, was that the very first festival you've ever been to? Like, had you never been to any festival before Innings Fest?
Pretty much. There was a local festival here in the Cleveland area called Laurel Live that was like 10 minutes from my house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to that one, but I don't consider that one the same thing because I didn't have to travel. I didn't have to stay over. We would usually only go to one day. And it was really family oriented. So I always took my kids. This is more like guys' weekend. And the reason why we chose Innings Festival was because Eddie Vedder played the first year we went. And that was right after I made a pact with my friend that we were going to go see Pearl Jam live. And so we started with Eddie solo, which was really cool. And like I said, I'm not the world's, I think I said this before we clicked the record button. I'm not the world's biggest Killers fan, but I love those first 2 records. I would love to see them live. They used to not be that great of a live band. And I've talked about this before, but I can't remember the lead singer's name right now. I'll think of it at some point. But yeah. The demarcation point for him is when he quit smoking. He became a way better live singer, and now they're just 10 times better live than they ever used to be because his vocals are just that much better. And then the only other Brandon Flowers, thank you. Oh, I forgot about the All American Rejects. They're like a shockingly good live band to this day. People underestimate them, I'll say. They have way more songs than what you think. And so like I don't know that I would go out of my way to see them, but I'm excited to get a chance to see them. And then the interesting one for me is Fall Out Boy, because I technically have seen Fall Out Boy before. It was like before they got really famous on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon show at the old grog shop with like 30 people. Almost nobody was there. And I believe that was a day that I was there to see The Beautiful Mistake open up. And I just wanted to see The Beautiful Mistake.
That's like the people who saw Goo Goo Dolls before A Boy Named Goo came out. Like,
that's me too. I saw them open up for Soul Asylum.
Man, there you go. That's amazing.
So, and I'm not super excited to see Fall Out Boy, but I know I'm going to know 10 songs and it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was asking about your intro was because I was curious, like, if your perspective on festivals, because like we're going to talk about some other the ways festivals could be changing, perhaps. But I was kind of curious about your background and history of festivals and how your opinion on them has changed over time. For me, what's funny is when I was in high school, I started going to a Christian music festival called Alive Fest in Canal Fulton, Ohio, up by Cleveland. And I remember going to it, and this was like the first couple times I went, like I went with a friend of mine's family. They had a really nice, like huge RV, so it wasn't you weren't really roughing it. But then a couple times after that, we actually tent camped there. But it was like a 3-day festival, and you were camping there. And I went with my brother one time. It was just me and my brother. It was I was in high school. I don't remember if my brother was that was maybe when I was a senior. My brother was a freshman, something like that. So we go by ourselves, and we just laughed because like we had just this tiniest little grill, and we were just like grilling out like boring hot dogs and like hamburgers. Like all the people around us like felt sorry for us for like giving us all this food and stuff, because it was like just here are these two kids, here doing this. But as far as the music was concerned, I remember thinking at that time like music festivals are the best thing ever. Like I go all day long, like just go to every single show, like just show after show after show at these festivals, seeing band after band after band. I saw so many bands that I loved. I was like, why would anybody go to a regular concert? Like festivals are the best. You get to see all of these bands. And then like as I sort of got older, you kind of start to like realize like, well, one problem is you're not seeing a real set by those bands. Seeing like as I started to see some of these bands that I saw at this festival, and I'd go and see them in Toledo, and I OC Supertones, Audio Adrenaline, DC Talk, like like all of these bands from that era. Like I'd go to Toledo and see them, and I'd be like, it is so much better seeing these bands at their own concert. Like getting to see a full-fledged out set where and oftentimes a lot more extravagant, stage set and everything. So I was like, well, that's the way to see it, And but I would still mix in a few festivals here and there. I went to Edge Fest up in Toronto one year to see Tool and Tea Party. Trying to remember who else was there. Seven Dust was there.
Well, and that's a really good question though, because like I did go to Ozfest when Tool and Korn were on Ozfest back in the old days. I went to did I say Ozfest? I
Yeah,
meant Lollapalooza. I went to the Lollapalooza that Tool and Korn played, and then I went to the Ozfest. Spoiler alert: Tool played Ozfest, so I went to the Ozfest because I was such a big Tool fan. That's when I saw the one and only time I saw Limp Bizkit
yeah,
in some of those bands, and
yeah,
that's the value of festivals too, because like I wouldn't have ever gone out of my way to see Limp Bizkit, and I wouldn't want to see them for 2 or 2.5 hours. But 80 minutes, a tight 80 minutes from Limp Bizkit, all right, I'll check that out once, no
yeah,
problem. And that's
yeah,
kind of the way I feel about Fall Out Boy now. But you're right, you get a band like Incubus, you want to see them on an actual headlining tour where they play their full set. They get a chance to kind of meander and really work the crowd and show their personality. They're not doing a lot of that on a festival set.
yeah. I think I really like, I think that the Edge Fest was the first time I ever saw Tool, I think. And I would say it was not a particularly memorable or great performance. I didn't think the band seemed into it at all. And, having seen Tool a couple times on their own set, there's just no comparison between the two. But the last like major festival, like I don't know, like I guess by default, I would almost call Metallica's Summer Sanitarium a festival, like because there were a lot of bands at those on those shows. But the last like real festival that I went to was Warped Tour. It was the last time it came to Germain Amphitheater here in Columbus before they closed that. And while I enjoyed getting to see, like I saw the Transplants, which is Tim Armstrong's side band, and getting to see that was a really cool moment for me. Loved that show. I remember just walking away from that. I was exhausted. the next day I like was still recovering from it. I was sunburnt like crazy. And I remember just thinking like, man, I think I'm actually getting too old for this. The funny thing is like, I mean, I was probably still in my 20s at that point. Like it was a while ago, but I don't know, like over time I've just found like these festivals to not be super appealing to me. This idea of, you know, standing all day long, like just, you know, dealing with like the crowds and the traffic. Like, I don't know, like something about it as I've gotten older just seems less charming to me, I guess I should say. So it's just funny that my perspective on festivals has really changed, going from being a wide-eyed kid, like festivals are the best. Like, why would anybody ever go to a regular show, to like, yeah, can I just go to the show and maybe just like skip a lot of the openers and just show up for the headliner and, you know.
Well, and that's one of the things that happened to us when we jumped back into festival land. If I can't remember what year the first one we went to, but it was a time of our life where we had a little bit more disposable income, so we bought VIP for every one of our festivals, and
Yeah.
so we had the better bathrooms and better seating
Yeah.
areas so that you could sit down for a little bit and relax in between bands. And maybe I wasn't running all the way across the festival to the side stage for this other artist every single time. But so that brings us to the next one, a band that I love, Coheed and Cambria, and they've done this before. They're doing a cruise, the SS Neverender, and it's Coheed and Cambria, Thursday, LS Dunes, The Deer Hunter, Hill, Hail the Sun, Illuminati Hotties, Meet Me at the Altar, The Fall of Troy, Pool Kids, and Code 7, and a bunch of others. And now I've never been on any cruise, let alone a music cruise.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that whole experience of going to that type of a festival, where you're going from Miami to Cozumel, I think I'm pronouncing that right, in Mexico, might be different, better, a more interesting experience. Maybe there's some mixing with the bands. But imagine seeing Thursday in a tropical environment.
So to clarify, the shows are not on the boat. The
I
boat,
think they are.
or they are on the boat.
I
Okay.
believe so.
Well, I think it's better if they are on the boat. I would be more interested in this if the shows are on
Experience
the
two
boat.
unique performances with Coheed and Cambria, one under the stars on the pool deck with your entire family. So I assume that means the people on the boat, and the other one is in the intimate setting of the Stardust Theater, which I assume is also on the boat.
Okay. So this might be the best way to possibly do it, because by nature on a boat, you don't have traffic. You can go to the show. If you want to go back to your room for a bit and relax, you can. Like, I'm not a cruise guy. Like, the concept of being stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean, just not super appealing to me. But this makes the festival experience a lot more intriguing to me than, talk about like some of my more recent experiences going to festivals.
All right, so this is awesome. I didn't even see all this. So you get the exclusive performances with Coheed and Cambria and the rest of the bands, I'm presuming. Every cabin gets their photo with Coheed and Cambria. They do
Yeah.
special Q&A sessions in the afternoon. Claudio does his own special Q&A. They have a trivia with the guitarist, Stump the Stever. You can run the deck with Josh. So he jogs. You can go jog with him.
All right. Right on. I wonder if he's getting up at 4 a.m. to go on those jogs with me.
Claudio's wife hosts a Q&A of some kind, or a coffee gathering. Then there's like, I don't even know what the Amory Wars experience would be. Gosh, and then they have a prom. They have a Coheed and Cambria prom night.
On.
I
I
bet it's
mean,
really fun. Like
I think
it's
so too.
probably a
Like,
little bit too much Coheed for me,
right.
but it sounds like they've planned all of it perfectly and spared no like opportunity to interact with the band and have a great time.
Yeah. Like, there's a lot of bands that I'm a super fan of, that an experience like that would be actually quite intriguing to me. So I think you got to give them props for this. Like, I think if you're asking me to yay or nay this as a concept, like, I think I'm going yay on this. Like, to me, like I said, like I just think this sounds so much better. Like, we are in festival overload. Like, what was that just today? What was that? When We Were Young was announced.
Where they
We
misspelled a bunch of band names on the T-shirt.
I mean, we've got Sonic Temple here in Columbus. There's
I've talked about that Louisville, Kentucky
that
fairgrounds where they
that
have Louder Than Life, Bourbon and Beyond.
yeah, I was trying to remember the name of those ones. But and then there's like 50 different ones in between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. They have so many different festivals. You know, not to mention Coachella. Are there any other like big like long-term mainstream ones still standing? Is Coachella the what about Bonnaroo? Is Bonnaroo still?
I think
Bonnaroo's
so.
still kicking. We are just in festival overload, and it really would take a very special lineup for me to like get really excited to do a festival at this point. So for me, I like this concept of changing things up and going for like a well-planned cruise, making the whole thing just one big event. I think that's really cool.
All right, which brings us to the next tropical vacation, which brings me, and I won't bury the lead too far here, but one of the things that we talked about after I went and saw Pearl Jam in Boston was how at our age and the amount of time that we've had with the material, all songs have kind of lost their original meaning. All the danger and aggression, and not in the case of Pearl Jam necessarily, but Tool is going to Mexico, Punta Cana. I'm sorry, Punta Cana in Dominican Republic. Is Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic?
No.
It says Punta Cana / Dominican Republic. So now I'm confused. Anyway, it's called Tool Live in the Sand, an all-inclusive destination festival with Tool Friday and Saturday, special guest Primus, Mastodon, Coheed and Cambria, Eagles of Death Metal, King's X, Fishbone, Wheel, CKY, Moonwalker, and Moonwalker. Now,
That's a solid lineup. I'll give
the
it that. That's a
destination
solid lineup.
festival, the tropical destination festival, that's something that Wilco has done for a long time. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Tool of all bands, could you imagine Tool with an umbrella drink?
That well, yeah, you would think if they were going to do anything, it would be to like Maynard's Vineyard or something like that, more so than a tropical destination. I don't think of tropical when I listen to Tool. That's not where my head's going, to a tropical setting.
What's the Hard Rock Hotel in Punta Cana?
Okay. Yeah, this one I'm not as sure about, but again, like I do think there's something to be said for the like destination idea of this. Like, are they making this like an all-inclusive type thing as well? Like you do that kind of thing, you put it in like an isolated environment. It does there is something kind of interesting to that, as opposed to going out to the middle of a desert for something, I suppose. But like, I'd really be curious to know like what the demand for this is from Tool fans. Like, Tool has a very hardcore loyal following. No question about that. But like,
And they're in their 40s and 50s now.
yeah, like, so that is kind of the question though, is like, is there a big appeal for the tropical destination aspect of it? Again, not that Tool needs everything to always be dark and mysterious, like, again, they're old men, like, but I there's still something to be said for hanging on to a certain element of your mystique. And this one definitely plays counter to that mystique of Tool, I would say. Like, look, I mean, this is something that Eddie Vedder has done with Ohana Fest for, however many years he's been doing that now. So you mentioned, Wilco, like, this isn't something that I'm not familiar with. And I think with the right band, like for me, like Eddie Vedder doing an Ohana Fest totally makes sense. Like, that's Eddie Vedder's vibe. He's
He's a
the
surfer. He's a surfer boy.
Hawaiian surf guy. Like, that's his thing, and it makes sense. I think my disconnect with this Tool one is just that it just does feel very, very out of left field, sort of, for Tool. But again, Tool is a band that, as much as you try to figure them out and you might think you have them figured out, they often do things that I find quite surprising.
And from a merchandising standpoint, they're kind of like the next Kiss. And I know people will be upset hearing me say that, maybe, but that's just how I feel about it. And so you pay your all inclusive. There's, if you stay at the Hard Rock, it's one price, the more expensive price. If you stay at the resort down the street, it's a little bit less money. And then there's a Tool VIP experience upgrade, which is $329 per person per day, and the upgrade includes access to the premier pit located directly in front of the stage, exclusive access to a portion of the sound check, a group photo with the members of Tool, special merchandise, early merchandise, commemorative lanyard,
Can we talk?
etc.
So the special merchandise is not something you are getting. It is something you have the opportunity to purchase, right? Wouldn't you, isn't
I
that how
would
you would read
presume
that?
so.
Yeah.
It says, let me read it verbatim. It says, one
Yeah.
specially designed merchandise item exclusive to VIPs.
So
So
you might actually get the item
you
then.
might actually get it.
Okay.
For $329, I hope you do.
Well, because that's what's funny. Like, so when I was at Ohio State as a student, I worked for the university development office, where we would call alumni and ask them for money. That fun job, you know. And the number one thing, I'm curious if you could guess. What do you think this is the number one question I would get from alumni when I called and asked them for money?
How much are you getting paid? What's your cut?
Oh, that would be a good one. But the number one question I got was, well, do I get football tickets with this?
That's actually, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the funny thing is the answer is not yes to that. The answer is, well, if you give, I want to say it was when I was working there, I think it was $2,500 a year. If you gave $2,500 in a year, you would get the opportunity to purchase season football tickets to Ohio State. So I'm always like amused when there's situations like, hey, you can pay a premium for the opportunity to buy more stuff. You know, it's a funny concept to me, but I'm glad that this does actually sound like you are getting the merchandise item. Although the early access one that you had said, early access to merchandise, that one I'm sure you probably still have to buy the merch.
Yeah, I would assume so. And I can't remember. I looked it up to see, what the pricing was, but it was,
That was
I
going to be
mean,
my
this,
next question, was if you remembered
oh,
how
here we
much it
go.
was.
If you go to the Hard Rock Hotel, if one person books the room and it's all inclusive, the price is $5,175. If two people book that room, the price is $2,588 per person. And it goes down if you book 3 and 4 people into a room. And I actually, I don't know what a normal Hard Rock vacation package would cost anyway, but they've
No.
already sold out two of the top packages. So
Hey. Yeah, that's funny too. Like, talking about like splitting the room. Like, in my 20s, my first thought would have been, let's get like 8 dudes and like let's just go. Like, I'll sleep on the floor. I don't care. This is another thing. Like, the older I got, I found my willingness to want to do that. To do the, like, let's get a bunch of dudes in a room. Like, it's like, maybe I just like my own room, like my own bed, like, you know.
and
You really
we've
value
actually
those
seen
things.
that continuum with us going to the Innings Festival. It started out where it was just me and one buddy, and we shared a hotel room with 2 double beds. And then the next time we went, we had four or five of us, and we got an Airbnb, and one person slept on the couch. And then the last time we went, like, a couple guys bunked up in a room that had a bunk bed, like it was designed for a family or whatever. And this time, if we go, everybody wants their own bedroom, period. Because I'm 45, a couple of the guys are a couple of years older than I am, and we're just not doing it anymore. Nobody
Yep.
wants to hear somebody else's sleep apnea. And
Yeah. Breaking out the CPAP.
yeah, no, it's just not happening anymore. I sleep very deeply, and I don't wake up for anything. But there's just, I'm too old. There's the lethal weapon. I'm just too old for this shit.
It's the most accurate thing. Like, there's probably no movie line I find myself quoting more frequently these days. It's just funny how much your perspective on things really does change. Like, it accelerates. It starts off slowly, like through your 20s. Like I've like my 20s, I was like more or less the same person throughout my entire 20s. And then the 30s, maybe a little bit in your early 30s, but your late 30s, you start to like once you get to 40, man, like I mean, I still feel younger than I am. Like I still have to be like question myself, like, wait, am I really 45? But you just find these little things like really sneaking up on you a lot more frequently. Your how much you value comfort, how much longer it takes you to recover from literally anything, so
Yeah, and
long story short, I don't think I want to test this and see how many people we can get to make it super cheap to go see Tool at the Hard Rock.
one on top of it, let's pretend like I could convince a buddy to go. Now I'm paying for my own airfare and I'm dropping $3,000, 2,500 or $3,000 for my half of a room.
Yeah.
Like now I'm taking a huge bite out of the family vacation budget from a
Yeah.
solo trip. And there's no way that not my wife anyway, I'm not going to convince my wife to go to a Tool festival.
Right.
She wouldn't even want to go to the shows. And that doesn't make her a bad person. It makes her a good person because she still married me and I would want to go to the shows.
It's a weird value proposition too, because like I do find myself like, the older you get, you do have a little bit more financial flexibility typically. And so like that value proposition changes too. Cause I was even just thinking about it, like, as you said that, like, so I'm going to split this cost. So we're going to get it. So it's going to be 2,500 in each. But like, I feel like my value has gone down by more than $2,500. Like I would almost rather just pay the 5,000 and have my own room as opposed to splitting that. So like that value
If I could
proposition
afford
math,
it, yeah.
right. But like that math just starts to get fuzzy in your head where you're like,
Well, I mean those are the only festivals that I had pulled up here. It's just it's interesting. I think part of the conversation is the we're now another 6 months post pandemic
yeah,
where everybody kind of blew their load with untapped demand, and the bands are still trying to find creative ways to make us want to keep coming out. And I think we're still going to get more and more canceled because we didn't sell enough tickets and things of that nature, because the prices have not really come back to earth on a lot of this stuff. I think we're going to
far
get a
from it.
lot more Black Keys type stories coming before it's all over. There's only one Taylor Swift in the world.
Yeah. And I that could be a thing though, where that could cause more festivals to form as a way of sort of circumventing that. I don't know. We'll see. I'm very we've talked about this week after week, it feels like, but it's really true. You can just really feel that we're on the precipice of like some kind of a seismic shift in the concert economy. And I'm not good at predicting how things will play out. I'm not a futurist, but it's definitely something I know both of us are going to be keeping our eyes on. So
Well, and as it stands, I'm going to a show on Friday night here in Cleveland for $25, and I'm looking forward to that show just about as much as anything else on the calendar. My friends in the Acid Bath tribute band are
yeah,
are going to light it up here in town. So it's if you're willing to keep digging in, that's a tribute band of my friends, so that one doesn't really count. But if you're willing to keep digging in and listening to these bands, these new bands, I think I maybe spent $30 to go see Foxing a couple weeks back, and they
yeah,
came to me. They were 15-20 minutes from my house,
yeah.
in and out, no problem.
I've got
That economy is always available.
yeah. Drug Church is going to be here in Columbus on Friday, so I'm still thinking about heading over to that and checking that out. So that'll be an interesting experience. But
I think you need to for research so you can talk about it next week.
there we go.
All right,
I
you
can
need
write
it.
it
You
off.
have anything else?
I can write it off as a business expense at that point.
Right.
The
Yeah.
$25 ticket.
Don't you have to have some revenues in order to have a business?
Yeah.
About that.
Follow, subscribe, tell your friends, all that stuff. We need money.
Yeah. And with
We
that,
need
we
money so
thank
we
you.
can afford our own room to go see Tool at the Hard Rock in the Dominican or wherever it is. So
Punta Cana, yeah.
Yeah.
Live in the sand, or go on the boat cruise with Coheed. All right. Well, with that, we thank you so much for tuning in to what was for us a late night edition of the Album of Record podcast. Please like, subscribe, share it with a friend. The audio version on Spotify, YouTube. We appreciate all the people who send us the feedback and have been listening. We do it for ourselves, but you guys are a close second. So we appreciate it so much. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the Album of Record podcast.